I rushed into the fire to save my whole family, but they abandoned me because the cost of my burn treatment was too expensive. My name is Mason Hale. The night I ran into the fire, I thought I was doing the most natural thing in the world, saving my wife, saving my kids, saving the life we had built together. I didn't know that by sunrise, I'd be the one they'd decide wasn't worth saving. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started with the smell of smoke. Not the faint kind that drifts in from a neighbor's barbecue, but the thick, cloying scent that claws into your lungs and screams danger. It was 2:13 a.m. when I bolted upright. The alarm hadn't even gone off yet. Years working night shifts in the auto shop had trained me to wake fast to react without hesitation. My first thought wasn't what's burning, it was get them out. I stumbled into the hallway and saw a dull orange glow bleeding up from the kitchen. The air was already hot heavy. Smoke curled up the stairwell, and behind me, my wife Claire was coughing in bed, still half asleep. Our 2 kids, Sam and Lily, were down the hall with their doors shut. There wasn't time to think. I yanked Claire up, shoving her toward the front door. "Get outside." Now I shouted, already turning back. My lungs burned, but I held my breath and sprinted into the kids' rooms one after the other, scooping them into my arms, ignoring their sleepy protests. The heat hit me like an open oven door when I stepped onto the landing. Something exploded downstairs, maybe a propane tank, maybe a cabinet collapsing. I didn't care. My only focus was the door at the far end of the hall. I shoved through it, feeling my skin prickle under the blast of heat. The night air outside was cool almost cruelly, so against the burns already forming on my arms. I pushed the kids toward Claire, who was standing barefoot on the lawn, eyes wide with shock. Then I made the mistake. I went back in. It wasn't even logical I'd gotten everyone out, but in the haze of adrenaline, I thought about the photo albums, the documents, the things we couldn't replace. I thought about the fact that I had insurance for the house, but not for the memories. The kitchen was an inferno by then. The ceiling groaned above me, and the smoke was so thick I could barely see. I grabbed a box of documents from the cabinet and turned to leave. That's when the floor beneath me cracked, my foot plunging through. My shin tore against splintered wood and fire licked at my jeans. The pain came in waves, sharp and searing. I tried to haul myself up, but my leg was trapped. The heat was unbearable, like standing too close to a bonfire, multiplied 100 times with no way to step back. I remember screaming. I remember the world tilting, the noise of my own heart pounding in my ears. And then, nothing. When I woke, everything was white. The ceiling tiles, the sheets, the bandages that wrapped me like a mummy. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled my nose, and my throat ached like I'd swallowed sandpaper. "You're in the ICU," a nurse's voice said gently. "You've been here for 3 days. 3 days. My brain was slow to catch up. My burns, arms, chest, one side of my face were the worst of it, but the smoke inhalation was bad too. I croaked out the question that mattered most. "My family. Are they okay?" "They're fine," she assured me. "Your wife said to tell you they're staying with her parents for now. The house is, well, it's gone, but you saved them." Relief washed over me, heavy and bittersweet. I didn't care about the house. I didn't even care about the burns. They were alive. But later that day, when the doctor came in with a clipboard, reality started to shift. "We've stabilized you," he said, "but you're looking at months of treatment, multiple skin grafts, rehab medication. I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's going to be expensive." "How expensive?" I asked. He hesitated, then gave me the number. It was higher than my yearly income. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that Claire and I would figure it out together, that we'd cut back, maybe start a fundraiser. Families stick together in times like this, right? That's what I believed. That night, Claire finally came. She looked tired, pale. She kissed my forehead but kept her hands in her pockets. "The doctors told me," she said quietly, "about the cost." I smiled faintly. "We'll figure it out." She didn't smile back. I should have noticed it then, the way she kept glancing at the door, the way her phone kept buzzing in her pocket. But I was too drugged, too relieved to see her to pay attention. I didn't know it yet, but that number the doctor gave me had already started a countdown, not to my recovery, but to my abandonment. Because in my family, love had a price tag, and I had just become too expensive to keep. The first week after waking up in the ICU was a blur of painkillers, dressing changes, and the occasional visit from Claire. At first she came every day, usually with the kids in tow. Sam would sit at the foot of the bed, swinging his legs, asking if my scars would make me look like a superhero. Lily would draw me pictures of our old house, always with a sun smiling in the corner. Those visits kept me going. Every time I saw them, I felt a kind of hope, like no matter how bad this got, I wasn't going through it alone. But each time Claire left, there was something behind her eyes I couldn't name. Not sadness exactly, more like calculation, like she was doing math in her head, weighing something invisible between us. I told myself it was stress. I mean, who wouldn't be stressed? Our home was gone. Insurance wouldn't cover everything. The doctor had been blunt. The hospital stay alone was over $180,000, not counting surgeries or rehab. Even saying the number out loud felt absurd, like it belonged in someone else's life. On the 6th day, Claire came in without the kids. She stood by the bed, twisting her wedding ring, her voice strangely formal. "Mason, I talked to my parents. They think we should look at all the options." "What options?" I asked, blinking. She hesitated as if the words were hot in her mouth. "About your treatment. Maybe we can't do all of it. The doctor said some of it is optional." "Optional," I cut in. My voice came out rougher than I meant. "Claire, these aren't luxury treatments. Without the grafts, I'm at risk for infection. Without the rehab, I might not walk right again. That's not optional, that's my life." She looked down. "We just don't have the money. And the insurance only goes so far. My parents already helped us once with the down payment. They can't." I could feel my heart pounding against the bandages on my chest. "We'll figure it out. I'll take out a loan, sell the truck. Hell, I'll sell the tools if I have to. But you don't just stop halfway because it's expensive." Claire didn't answer. She kissed my cheek like she was clocking out of a shift and left. The visit started thinning after that, from daily to every other day. Then, "Sorry, Mason, this week's been crazy texts. One evening, a nurse came in while adjusting my IV. 'You still want me to hold those calls from the billing office?' she asked." I frowned. "What calls?" She looked surprised. "They've been trying to reach you for days. Your insurance premium wasn't paid this month. They're saying it lapsed." I felt cold even under the heat lamps in the burn unit. "That's not possible. Claire handles the autopay. It's set up on our joint account." The nurse shifted uncomfortably. "Might want to check with her." I did. That night I called Claire. She picked up on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Why didn't you pay the insurance?" I asked. A pause. "We needed that money for other things. The kids' school trip. Groceries." "Groceries?" My voice broke into a disbelieving laugh. "Claire, you just risked my treatment for a field trip. You're overreacting," she said flatly. "It's just one payment. We'll sort it out." But she didn't sound like she planned to. The next week I noticed something else, the way my phone stayed silent unless I called first. How her replies were shorter. How the kids didn't visit at all. Then came the moment I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday afternoon, quiet except for the hum of the oxygen machine. My nurse friend Jamie stopped by on her break. She had that look people get when they're deciding whether to tell you something you might not want to hear. "You know about the fundraiser, right?" she asked gently. "What fundraiser?" I said. Jamie blinked. "The one your wife set up. On GoFundMe. Pictures of you in the hospital. Hero Dad saves family from house fire. It's gone viral. People have been donating like crazy. Last I checked, it was over $150,000. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. 150. What? She pulled out her phone, turned the screen to me. There it was, my face half wrapped in gauze. My name in bold letters. Claire's heartfelt story in the caption. The donations list scrolled for pages. "Claire hasn't mentioned this," I said slowly. Jamie's eyes softened. "I figured you knew. Mason, be careful." When Claire visited that night, I didn't say a word about the fundraiser. Not yet. I just watched her. Watched the way she avoided looking me in the eye when I asked how her day was. Watched the way she brushed off any talk about bills or money. It hit me then the cost of my survival wasn't just measured in dollars. It was measured in how quickly the people you die for could decide you weren't worth the price. And I was starting to suspect that the number in Claire's head had already been met. The days blurred together after that. Burn treatment has a way of making time feel like it's moving through syrup, slow, heavy, and exhausting. Every dressing change felt like fire all over again. The only thing sharper than the pain was the growing ache in my chest every time my phone stayed silent. At first I tried to justify it. Maybe Claire was busy with the kids. Maybe she was overwhelmed with rebuilding our lives. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't just distance, it was withdrawal. The nurses noticed too. "Haven't seen your wife much lately," one of them said one morning as she adjusted my bandages. Her tone was casual, but her eyes searched mine, looking for a reaction. I just forced a smile and mumbled something about her being busy. Truth was, I couldn't admit it out loud yet. Admitting it would make it real. Then came the day I saw her in the hallway, and she didn't see me. I'd been cleared to try short walks with a physical therapist, so they wheeled me down to the hospital lobby. From across the atrium, I spotted Claire at the reception desk. She was laughing. Not the tired, strained smile she gave me, but a genuine laugh, head tilted back, eyes sparkling. She was standing close to her brother Greg, and they were looking at something on his phone. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw her mouth form the words. "It's all working out." For a second I wanted to call her name, but something in my gut told me to stay quiet. So I watched them walk out together, my chest tight, my hands clenching against the wheelchair arms. The next week, the fundraiser hit $180,000. I still hadn't heard a word about it from Claire. Jamie, my nurse friend, was careful not to push me, but one afternoon she slipped me a small printout from the GoFundMe page. It showed the total, the top donors, and the date the last withdrawal was made the day before I saw Claire and Greg in the lobby. I stared at that date until it blurred. When Claire finally came that evening, she brought me a bag of takeout, my favorite burger place. I forced a thank you and tried to keep my voice steady. "How's everything with the house stuff?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's fine. We're figuring it out. My parents. Greg's been helping too." I looked at her for a long moment. "Greg's been helping? With money?" Her eyes flicked away. "Why are you asking so many questions?" "Mason, you should focus on healing." That's when it clicked. She wasn't just hiding something. She was managing me, feeding me enough to keep me quiet, but not enough to let me see the full picture. 2 days later, the insurance company sent me a letter directly. I wasn't supposed to see it. Claire usually handled the mail, but the nurse had brought it up with the meal tray, thinking it was just a get well card. It was a final notice. My policy had been terminated for non-payment. Effective immediately, all remaining treatment would be billed at the uninsured rate. When I called Claire, she didn't even try to deny it. "We can't pay those premiums and keep the kids in school and pay rent," she said. Something had to give. My voice shook, but not from weakness. Something had to give, and you chose me. "It's not like that," she snapped. "Don't make me out to be the villain." I almost laughed. "Claire, you raised nearly $200,000 in my name." "Where is it?" Silence. Just a faint background noise of her breathing. "Then we'll talk about it later. I can't do this right now." And she hung up. From that day, her visits stopped altogether. My calls went unanswered. The kids didn't come. The only updates I got about my own family were through Jamie, who'd sometimes overhear bits and pieces when Claire stopped by the nurse's station to drop off paperwork. One evening, I sat staring at the dark window, seeing my own pale reflection in the glass. The burns were healing, but something deeper was breaking the understanding that the people I'd literally walked through fire for had decided I was no longer worth the effort. I wasn't ready to admit it to anyone yet, but I could feel the shift inside me. The part of me that still clung to hope was shrinking, hardening, and in its place something colder was starting to take root. Because if my own wife could abandon me at my lowest, maybe I needed to start thinking less about forgiveness and more about what I'd do when I got back on my feet. If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. The day I was discharged should have felt like a victory. I'd survived the fire, the surgeries, the endless nights staring at the ceiling, while pain gnawed at me like a constant shadow. I should have been going home to my family, to warmth, to the people I nearly died for. Instead, I was dropped off at a bare, dim apartment I didn't recognize. It was on the far side of town, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, the kind of place you rent by the month when you're desperate. My discharged nurse, who was kind enough to drive me, helped carry my small bag inside. I asked her if she was sure this was the right address. She gave me a sympathetic look and handed me a folded note. "Mason, I can't have the kids around all the medical stuff, and my parents think it's better if you're somewhere quiet to recover. We can't afford to cover your bills and rent something big enough for all of us right now, This is temporary. I'll visit when I can. There was no key to our old house because there was no old house anymore, and there was no mention of the fundraiser. The nurse hesitated in the doorway. You have groceries. Anyone coming by? I shook my head. She sighed, looked like she wanted to say more, but instead just said, call if you need anything, and left me in the echoing silence. I shuffled through the apartment. The furniture was mismatched. The bed sagged in the middle, and there was a faint smell of stale cigarette smoke clinging to the curtains. In the kitchenette, a half-empty box of crackers and a jar of peanut butter sat on the counter. The first night was the worst. Without the steady beeping of the hospital monitors or the background hum of the staff, the silence was deafening. My burns itched and ached, but I had no nurse to adjust the dressings. I had a list of follow-up appointments, but no car Claire had taken mine for the kids. I called her 3 times that night, no answer. I texted, can you bring the kids tomorrow? Her reply came hours later. Not a good week. They're busy with school. I'd been willing to die for them, and now they were too busy to see me. Or maybe it wasn't their choice at all. By the second week, I'd started piecing things together. Greg's name kept coming up whenever I spoke to anyone connected to Claire, her parents, her friends. He was always helping her, supporting her, making sure she's okay. Funny how no one asked who was making sure I was okay. And then came the call from Jamie. She didn't bother with small talk. Mason, I'm sorry, but I think you need to know this. That fundraiser Claire and Greg closed it last week. Total raised was $182,467. None of it went to the hospital. My stomach twisted. What do you mean, none of it? I mean, she said carefully. I overheard Greg bragging to one of the nurses about putting down a deposit on a condo, and Claire was talking about trading in the minivan for a new SUV. For a moment, I couldn't even respond. It felt like my brain was lagging behind my body, trying to catch up to the reality that my burns, my story, my suffering had been turned into cash and then spent without me seeing a cent. I confronted Claire that evening. She finally picked up on the 4th try. Where's the money from the fundraiser? I asked, skipping any kind of greeting. A pause. Why are you bringing that up now? Because I just found out it's gone. And because it was raised for my medical bills, Claire. People donated because they thought they were helping me. Her tone shifted to defensive in an instant. We needed it for the kids, for a stable home, for a condo. I shot back, for a new SUV. You don't get it, she snapped. You can't work right now. You're not the same. I have to think about what's best for the family. I laughed, but it came out hollow. The family or yourself? Her voice went cold. This conversation is over, and just like that, the line went dead. The next morning, I woke to find my bank app locked. My joint account with Claire, the one where my small savings and last paycheck sat, was under review. I didn't have to guess who had initiated that. With the money frozen, no transportation, and no one I could call, without it somehow getting back to Claire, I was cornered. But if she thought I was just going to fade quietly into the background, she didn't know me as well as she thought. I started keeping notes, dates, times, conversations, every unanswered call, every deflected question. I screenshotted the fundraiser page from the cash Jamie had sent me, preserving the goal description and the list of donors. I wrote down the details about the SUV and the condo deposit. I might have been weak physically, but I still had my mind, and I wasn't going to let them use my own heroism as a cash grab without consequences. One afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I expected it to be the landlord, maybe even Claire, but it was a man in a crisp button-down shirt holding a folder. Mason Hale, he asked. Yeah, I'm Aaron Phillips, a social worker with the hospital's recovery program. Your nurse referred me. She said you might need some help with more than just medical follow-ups. I let him in. Over instant coffee at the chipped kitchen table, I told him everything. The abandonment, the fundraiser, the money disappearing. He listened without interrupting, his eyes narrowing at certain points. When I finished, he said, I know a lawyer who takes cases like this pro bono. Misuse of charitable funds is a serious matter, especially if it crosses state lines through donations. I sat back, stunned. So you're saying, I'm saying Aaron said if you want to fight this, you have a shot, but you'll need to be patient, meticulous, and ready for them to deny everything. Patience, I could manage. Meticulous, I could be. And as for their denials, I'd lived through worse than their lies. That night, I lay in bed staring at the cracks in the ceiling. The burns still itched, the scars still pulled uncomfortably when I moved, but something else was burning now, a controlled, steady fire deep inside me. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They thought my pain was theirs to spend. I wasn't just going to heal. I was going to make sure every dollar they stole saw the light of day. And when it did, I wanted to be there, standing, no walking, on my own 2 feet, to watch the shock register on their faces. I'd already walked through one fire. It looked like I was about to walk through another. The next few weeks became a strange mix of physical therapy and detective work. By day, I learned to walk again without limping, each step pulling against the grafts on my legs like they were stitched too tight. By night, I pieced together the puzzle of where my fundraiser money had gone. Aaron, the social worker, introduced me to the lawyer. He'd mentioned a sharp-eyed woman named Dana Reed. She was younger than I expected, but her confidence was solid, the kind that made you feel like she'd walk into a fight and come out holding the other person's teeth. She met me at my apartment with a yellow legal pad and a recorder. "Let's start from the beginning," she said, "every detail, no matter how small." For 2 hours I told her everything: the fire, the hospital stay, the fundraiser. I'd never been told about the sudden withdrawal of the money, the condo deposit, the SUV. I gave her the screenshots Jamie had sent me and the notes I'd been keeping. When I finished, Dana leaned back in her chair. "Mason, what they did isn't just unethical, it's potentially criminal. Misappropriation of charitable funds, fraud, even civil theft depending on the jurisdiction. But here's the thing, they're family. This could get ugly fast." I didn't even blink. "I've already been through ugly." She smiled faintly. "Good, then you won't scare easy." The first thing Dana did was pull the public transaction history from the fundraiser site. Most people don't realize that if you know where to look, you can see the withdrawal dates and amounts even if the page is taken down. The pattern was clear: small withdrawals at first, then a massive one right before the account was closed. "That last one," Dana said, tapping the page, "matches the date Jamie told you about. We'll subpoena bank records to follow the trail." She also suggested we get witness statements. Jamie agreed to write one confirming she'd overheard Greg talking about the condo and Claire trading in the van. Aaron offered to testify about my living conditions after discharge, which painted a very different picture from the stable recovery environment Claire claimed online. The more we dug, the more my anger settled into something colder resolve. One afternoon, while I was practicing walking without the cane, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. "Mason, it's Greg." I felt my jaw tighten. "What do you want?" He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Look, man, I know you're upset, but Claire's just trying to do what's best for the kids. That money, it's complicated. You weren't working and there were bills piling up. We couldn't just let everything fall apart." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So you fixed it by buying a condo. Don't be dramatic. It's an investment, something for the family's future." "The family," I repeated slowly. "And I'm not part of that anymore." There was a pause. "You're different now, Mason. Things have changed." I didn't yell, I didn't curse, I just said, "You have no idea how much they have." And I hung up. Dana's strategy was simple: freeze the remaining assets before they could spend more, then hit them with a civil suit to recover what they'd taken. If we could prove intent, we might even get criminal charges filed. The injunction hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Until then, Dana told me, say nothing to them. Let them think you're too broken to fight back. So I did. I didn't answer Claire's occasional guilt texts. "The kids miss you. Why are you being like this? You're tearing the family apart." I didn't rise to the bait. Every message was forwarded straight to Dana. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The fire, the hospital, the moment I realized they'd abandoned me. I remembered the sound of my kids laughing in the backyard, the way Claire used to lean against me when we watched old movies. I also remembered her voice on the phone. "You're not the same." Maybe she was right. I wasn't the same. I was done assuming love meant loyalty. The hearing was in a small wood-paneled courtroom that smelled faintly of dust and coffee. Claire was there, sitting stiffly in a navy dress, Greg beside her in a suit that looked rented. She didn't look at me once. Dana laid out the timeline, the fundraiser's stated purpose, the withdrawal history, and the sudden purchases. She entered Jamie's statement into the record, along with Aaron's report about my living conditions. When the judge asked Claire where the money went, she launched into a rambling explanation about urgent expenses and stability for the children. Greg tried to back her up, but the judge cut him off. "So you're telling me," the judge said slowly, "that over $180,000 was raised for Mr. Hale's medical expenses and not $1 was used for that purpose?" Claire shifted in her seat. "It was all for the good of the family." "The motion to freeze assets is granted," the judge said, his gavel hitting the block. "Further financial disclosure will be compelled." Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time, the tide had shifted. They couldn't just burn through the rest of the money. They couldn't keep pretending I was too broken to notice. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee, looking at the thick stack of legal papers Dana had left with me. Every page was another step toward taking back what they'd stolen. And I wasn't just talking about the money. They'd taken my trust, my sense of safety, my belief that family meant unconditional support. I intended to reclaim every piece of myself they thought they'd buried, because I'd already survived one fire. This one, I was going to walk out of it stronger. The freeze on Claire and Greg's accounts was like throwing a rock into a hornet's nest. 3 days after the hearing, I got my first real phone call from Claire in weeks. Not a text, not a voicemail, but a full-blown screaming into the speaker call. "Mason, what the hell did you do?" she shouted the moment I answered. "Do you know what this is doing to us? The kids are scared. I can't access my own money to pay for groceries or bills." I let her rant for a full 30 seconds before saying calmly, "You mean the money that was raised for my treatment, the money you never spent on me?" Her voice went from furious to defensive in a blink. "It's our money. We're married. You're making this into some legal witch hunt when we should be working together. You stopped working with me the moment you left me in a rented apartment and used my burns as your payday," I said flatly. "So don't call this our anything." There was a sharp inhale on the other end, the kind of sound someone makes when they realize they've lost the upper hand. Then she hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the dark screen. For the first time, I wasn't shaken. I was steady. Dana was relentless. She filed motions for bank subpoenas, sent formal requests for transaction records from the fundraiser platform, and began tracing every withdrawal. What she uncovered was worse than I'd imagined. The money had gone toward a $45,000 deposit on a waterfront condo, a $36,000 SUV paid in full, several large payments to luxury retailers, jewelry, high-end clothing, electronics, a $9,000 family vacation package booked for the summer, which was now on hold because of the freeze. Not a single payment to the hospital, not a single insurance premium. "People donated thinking they were saving your life," Dana said during our next meeting, sliding the papers toward me. "And they funded a shopping spree instead. That's a strong fraud case, Mason. Civil court is just the start. If we can push the DA, this could go criminal." I imagined Claire on the witness stand having to explain why she thought a diamond bracelet was a medical necessity. I didn't smile, but I felt something close to satisfaction settle deep in my chest. Meanwhile, I kept going to physical therapy. The work was grueling. Scar tissue doesn't like to stretch, and every step felt like my skin was resisting me. But every time I felt the sting, I imagined walking into that courtroom without a cane, my head high, my eyes level with theirs. Jamie still checked in on me, usually after her shifts. She'd bring coffee and a couple of sandwiches, saying she didn't trust me to eat like a human on my own. She also kept me updated on the whispers around the hospital. Apparently the story had leaked not to the press, but among staff. The hero dad abandoned after fire was making the rounds, and not one person seemed to be on Claire's side. "They're calling her the fundraiser fraud," Jamie said one night, smirking over her cup. I chuckled, then sobered. "Doesn't feel real yet. Like, she can't really have gone that far." Jamie's smile faded. "Mason, she already did. Greg tried calling me once." This time his tone was different, less cocky, more desperate. "Look, man, maybe we can settle this without dragging it out," he said. "You get some money, we keep, some everyone moves on." I almost laughed at the audacity. "You want me to negotiate how much of my stolen money I can have back?" "It's not like that," he insisted. "You're making it ugly. People are going to start asking questions, and that's not good for anyone." "Oh, I want people asking questions." I told him, "That's the point." He swore under his breath and hung up. 2 weeks later, we had our first mediation session. It was supposed to be a chance to resolve matters amicably, but the moment we sat down, it became a battlefield. Claire showed up in another expensive-looking dress, Greg in a tailored suit. Across the table, Dana slid the financial statements toward them. This, she said evenly, is every transaction made from the fundraiser account. As you can see, none of these are medical expenses. Claire's face flushed. We had to take care of the family. The family Dana cut in? You mean yourselves, not your husband who was living in a one-bedroom apartment with no transportation while you bought waterfront property. Greg muttered something about emotional stress, and Dana didn't even glance at him. Emotional stress doesn't excuse fraud, and it certainly doesn't buy you an SUV. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. Every time I caught Claire's eye, she looked away first. By the end of the session, they'd refused to admit wrongdoing, but the mediator's notes were clear. They were losing ground. That night, I walked the length of my apartment without the cane for the first time. My legs burned, my chest ached, but I made it. Standing there in the quiet, I realized I'd crossed a line not just in my recovery, but in my mindset. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I wasn't holding on to the hope that they'd wake up and apologize. I was at building my case, my strength, my life without them. And when the time came to face them in court, I wouldn't just be the man they'd left behind in the fire. I'd be the one standing in the flames they'd set, walking out with everything they thought they'd stolen. By the time the mediation collapsed, I'd accepted that there was no turning this into a family matter anymore. Claire and Greg weren't going to suddenly grow a conscience, admit what they did, and hand over the money. They were going to fight, and I was going to be ready. Dana told me something that stuck. We're not just proving they took the money. We're showing the court they knew it wasn't theirs to take. That meant intent, and intent meant evidence. So I doubled down. Every spare moment I wasn't in physical therapy, I was combing through my phone records, old emails, even my social media messages. I found screenshots from friends sending me, "Get well." Soon notes with links to the fundraiser notes I'd never seen at the time, because Claire was filtering my inbox. One friend wrote, "Hope. This helps, man. I donated $500. Claire says it's going to your hospital bills. $500 gone straight into her shopping spree." Another sent me a screenshot of a text from Claire thanking them for helping us keep things together while Mason recovers. That part might have been true, except keeping things together apparently meant upgrading her life while mine was falling apart. Aaron, the social worker, kept finding ways to help. One afternoon, he called to say he'd been able to get the hospital's billing department to give a written statement. Not a single payment had ever been made from the fundraiser toward my treatment. "That's huge," Dana said when I forwarded it to her. "This isn't just your word against hers anymore. It's black and white proof." We also discovered that Claire had posted updates on the fundraiser page, claiming the money had been used for specialized therapies and at-home medical equipment. I didn't own a single piece of medical equipment unless you counted the cane I borrowed from the hospital. Through all this, I still had to focus on my body. PT sessions became a strange parallel to the legal fight, both painful, both requiring patience, both teaching me how to move forward without breaking. Every morning, I'd look at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The scars were still raw in places, the skin shiny and stretched. But my eyes were different, harder, clearer. Jamie noticed it too. One evening, after she dropped off dinner, she said, "You're starting to look like someone who's already won, even if the court date's still weeks away." I shrugged, but inside, I knew she was right. Winning isn't just about the final verdict. It's about taking back control before they even realize you've done it. Then, out of nowhere, Claire showed up at my apartment. It was the first time I'd seen her outside of court in months. She stood in the doorway holding a bag of groceries like some peace offering. "I thought we could talk," she said. I leaned against the door frame, blocking her from walking in. "About what, how you turned my burns into a down payment?" Her jaw tightened. "Mason, this is tearing the kids apart. They don't understand why you're doing this to me." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just making sure you can't keep what you stole." "It's not that simple," she said quickly. "You weren't working. We had bills. And somehow I cut in those bills looked exactly like a condo, an SUV, and a summer vacation." She set the grocery bag down hard on the floor, the plastic rustling. "You've changed," she said quietly, like it was an accusation. "I had to," I replied. "You made sure of that." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, not guilt, not regret, but recognition. She knew I wasn't going to fold. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the groceries behind. I didn't touch them. 2 days later, Dana called. We got the bank records. I met her at her office and she laid them out like a dealer showing cards. Every fundraiser withdrawal was matched with a corresponding deposit into Claire's personal account, not the joint account, hers alone. From there, the money bled out into dozens of purchases, each one more damning than the last. Jewelry store, furniture showroom, luxury spa, private school tuition paid a year in advance. They didn't just take the money, Dana said. They made sure it could never be confused as shared marital funds. This was deliberate. That word deliberate hit me harder than I expected. I'd always known on some level that Claire's betrayal wasn't a moment of weakness, but seeing it in cold, undeniable numbers made it final. She hadn't just abandoned me because I was expensive to keep alive. She'd turned my survival into a profit margin and invested in her own comfort. That night, I went for my longest walk yet. No cane, no brakes, just steady steps down the dimly lit sidewalks around my building. Every step hurt, but it was the kind of pain that meant healing, not breaking. I thought about the fire, the heat, the moment I'd gone back inside for things that didn't matter. I thought about the ICU, the phone calls that stopped coming, the note on the counter of that empty apartment. I thought about the man I'd been before all this and the man I was now. This fight wasn't just about getting the money back. It was about showing them and myself that I couldn't be written off, that I wouldn't stay burned and broken in the corner they'd shoved me into. The court date was coming, and when it did, I'd be ready to walk straight into that room, scars and all, without flinching, because I'd already survived one kind of fire. The next one, I intended to win. The weeks leading up to the court date felt like the longest stretch of my life, a slow boil of anticipation, strategy, and quiet rage. Every day, Dana and I went over some new piece of evidence. Every day, I pushed my body further in therapy. It was like training for two battles at once, one for my mobility, one for my dignity. The case had grown stronger than I dared hope. Between the fundraiser withdrawal records, the bank statements, and the hospital's confirmation that they never received a cent, Claire and Greg were cornered. Dana's confidence was absolute, but she still cautioned me. They're going to try to turn this into a pity play, she warned. They'll cry about the kids, about the stress. They'll paint you as bitter, vengeful. You need to stay calm. The judge needs to see you as the reasonable one, the man they exploited. I nodded. I'd already practiced the calm face in the mirror, the one that didn't twitch when I heard lies. A week before the hearing, Aaron called with something unexpected. You might want to sit down for this, he said. Claire tried to start a second fundraiser, different platform. This time, it's supposedly for the kids' therapy and emotional recovery. My chest went cold. You're kidding me? Nope. It didn't get far. The platform pulled it after a complaint, probably because of the first case. But it shows her mindset. She hasn't learned a damn thing. I passed the tip to Dana. She grinned like a shark. Perfect. This goes straight to intent and pattern of behavior. On the day of the hearing, the courthouse smelled faintly of old carpet and coffee. I walked in on my own 2 feet, slow but steady, wearing the only suit I owned. The scars on my neck and hands were visible, and I didn't bother to hide them. Let them see exactly what I'd survived. Claire and Greg were already there, whispering to each other. She looked immaculate, as if she were walking into a business meeting, not a fraud hearing. Greg avoided eye contact entirely. The judge took the bench, and Dana got to work. She presented the fundraiser details, the bank trail, the hospital statement, and to my quiet satisfaction, the failed second fundraiser. She painted a picture so clear, even I had trouble believing it was my life she was describing. When it was Claire's turn, she started crying almost immediately. I was under so much stress, she said. I didn't know how to manage everything. Mason wasn't working, and the kids needed stability. Maybe I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt him. Dana didn't even blink. Mrs. Hale, you made multiple large purchases, a condo, a luxury SUV jewelry, and a vacation in the weeks following fundraiser withdrawals. Are you saying those were necessary for the children's stability? Claire's lip trembled. We needed a fresh start. The judge raised an eyebrow. With other people's money, Greg tried to jump in about managing finances, but was shut down with a firm, "You'll have your turn, sir." By the end of the hearing, the judge's expression had gone from neutral to openly disapproving. He ordered a full accounting of every dollar spent, restitution to me from the frozen funds, and referred the matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. It wasn't the final victory yet, but it was enough to make Claire's face drain of color. After the session, she approached me in the hallway. "You're ruining us," she hissed. I looked her in the eye. No, you did that yourself. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. For a second, I thought she might slap me. Instead, she turned on her heel and stalked away, Greg trailing behind like a shadow. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the court papers spread out in front of me. The air in the room felt lighter, like I'd opened a window after months of smoke. I still had scars. I still had nights where the fire came back in dreams. But I also had proof that I wasn't powerless. The frozen funds would soon start coming back to me. Enough to cover the surgeries I'd postponed, enough to help me finally move out of this cramped apartment. But more than that, I had something they could never take back, the knowledge that I'd stood up to them and refused to be erased. I'd already survived one fire they thought would finish me. Now I was walking out of the second one with my head high, and they were the ones left choking on the smoke. The restitution process took weeks, but each update from Dana felt like oxygen after months of breathing smoke. The court-appointed accountant traced every cent, pulling receipts that made even my lawyer shake her head. One stood out: a $12,000 payment to a luxury spa retreat, just 2 days after a donor sent a heartfelt message saying they hoped their $100 would help with my life-saving treatment. I sat there staring at the paper, wondering how Claire could read something like that and still walk into a boutique for a facial and a massage. When the first portion of the frozen funds hit the court's escrow account, Dana called me. "They've managed to burn through a lot of it," she admitted, "but there's still close to $90,000 we can get back to you once the paperwork clears." $90,000, not the full $182 to $1,000, but enough to change the course of my recovery and enough to make sure they couldn't enjoy the rest. The DA's office had started sniffing around too. Aaron told me a detective had come by the hospital to ask questions about the fundraiser, and Jamie later confirmed she'd given them a statement. "It's not just about you anymore," she said one evening when she dropped by. "They're looking at this as a case of public fraud. There are donors out there who want answers, and the DA wants to be the one to give them." I nodded slowly. Good, they deserve that much. In the meantime, I kept rebuilding my life in small, deliberate steps. I upgraded from the sagging mattress in the corner of my apartment to an actual bed frame. I started cooking again instead of living on takeout and instant noodles. And every morning, I walked an extra block before turning back, testing the limits of my legs and the skin grafts that still pulled uncomfortably when I stretched too far. It wasn't just physical progress. My mind felt sharper, my focus steadier. I wasn't lying awake at night replaying what they'd done now. I was thinking about what I could do next. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a woman introduced herself as a journalist from a local news station. "We've been following your case," she said. "Several donors from the fundraiser reached out to us. Would you be willing to share your side of the story on camera?" Part of me hesitated. Going public meant opening myself up to scrutiny. But another part, the one that had walked into a fire without a second thought, knew this was the final step in taking back control. When and where, I asked. The interview was in a small studio, nothing fancy. They mic'd me up, adjusted the lighting, and asked me to start from the night of the fire. I told the whole story: the heat, the smoke pulling my family to safety, wake up in the ICU, learning about the fundraiser I'd never known existed, watching the money vanish into condos and SUVs while I recovered alone in a bare apartment. They asked if I hated Claire. I told them no hate would mean she still had a place in my life. She didn't. What I felt now was something stronger: certainty. Certainty that I'd done the right thing by fighting back. Certainty that the people who donated deserved to know where their money had gone. Certainty that survival wasn't just about living through the fire, it was about walking through the aftermath without letting it burn you from the inside out. The segment aired a week later. My phone lit up with messages, some from old friends I hadn't heard from in years, some from strangers who said my story gave them courage to stand up for themselves. A few were from donors thanking me for being honest. Claire didn't call, neither did Greg, but I knew they'd seen it. Dana called too, her voice carrying a satisfaction I hadn't heard before. The DA just confirmed they're filing criminal charges, fraud, misappropriation, and a couple of others I'll explain when we meet. This is happening, Mason. For the first time since the fire, I felt like the story wasn't about my suffering anymore. It was about my survival and their reckoning. I'd gone into the flames to save them. Now I was watching the flames finally catch up to them. The first criminal hearing was nothing like the civil sessions. This time, it wasn't just about me getting my money back, it was about the state deciding whether Claire and Greg's actions crossed into outright theft and fraud. The courtroom was colder, quieter, the air charged with something heavier. The DA's team came in with thick binders, and for the first time, Claire and Greg had separate lawyers. That alone told me they knew the walls were closing in. I sat behind the prosecutor, my hands clasped in my lap. Every now and then I could feel Claire's eyes on me, but I didn't return the look. I wasn't here for her anymore. I was here for the truth to stand in the open. The DA laid it out in meticulous detail, the fundraiser's stated purpose, the donations from people across the country, the rapid withdrawals, the personal purchases. Each exhibit was a dagger, receipts for jewelry booking, confirmations for the vacation, the SUV invoice with Claire's name in bold at the top. When they got to the hospital statement confirming 0 payments made, I saw Greg shift uncomfortably, his lawyer leaning in to whisper something that made his face pale. Claire's defense tried to spin it. They claimed she'd misunderstood the fundraiser's purpose, thinking the money was for general family support during my recovery. They painted her as a stressed wife making emotional decisions under financial strain. But then the DA brought up the second fundraiser, the one she tried to start after the freeze. The courtroom went still. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. "In your own words, Mrs. Hale," the prosecutor said, "you stated in the second fundraiser description that the money would be used to pay for the children's therapy following the loss of their father's role in the household. That was while Mr. Hale was alive, recovering, and actively seeking to rejoin the household. Explain to the court how that is not deceptive." Claire's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. During a recess, Dana leaned toward me. "If they offer a plea deal, I think they'll take it. This case is too clean for them to risk trial." Sure enough, by the end of the day, the whispers started. Greg's lawyer approached the DA asking about possible terms. From what I overheard, Greg wanted to cut a deal in exchange for testifying against Claire. I couldn't decide if it was cowardice or survival instinct, probably both. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Microphones, cameras, questions fired from every angle. "Mr. Hale, do you have anything to say to your wife? Do you think justice is being served? What do you hope the outcome will be?" I kept my answers short. The donors deserve to know the truth. I'm here to make sure they get it. One reporter asked if I'd forgive Claire if she apologized. I paused, then said, "Forgiveness is free, but trust is earned," and she spent every last bit of mine. Over the next week, things moved fast. Greg agreed to a plea in exchange for a lighter sentence and full cooperation. His statement confirmed what I'd already known. Claire had planned to keep most of the fundraiser money from the start. She'd told him the fire was a blessing in disguise because it gave them a financial fresh start. Those words hit me harder than I expected, not because they surprised me, but because they confirmed that her betrayal wasn't a reaction to stress. It was a choice. When the day came for sentencing, Claire didn't look at me once. The judge read the charges, the counts of fraud, and the restitution order. She would serve time, though less than I thought was fair, and was ordered to repay what remained from her portion of the funds. It wasn't a perfect ending. I'd never get back every dollar. I'd never erase the months of abandonment, the nights I lay in a strange apartment, wondering why my life had been traded away. But walking out of that courthouse, I realized I didn't need perfection. I needed closure, and I had it. Back home, I sat in my kitchen, the evening light spilling across the table. The scars on my arms caught the glow, a reminder of the fire I'd walked through twice now. The first time I went back into the flames to save my family. The second I walked through them to save myself. And I came out knowing this: you can lose everything, a house, a marriage, a bank account, and still win if you refuse to let the people who burned you decide how your story ends. Life after the sentencing was strangely quiet. For months my days had been consumed by legal meetings, court appearances, and the slow grind of physical therapy. Now the phone stopped ringing, as much the court dates were off my calendar, and my schedule was mine again. At first the silence felt foreign. I'd gotten used to waking up with my mind already racing, thinking about the next piece of evidence, the next move in the case. Now I woke up to nothing but the sound of the city outside my window and the occasional groan of the old apartment pipes. But that quiet became a gift. It let me focus on the parts of my life that weren't about them, Claire, Greg, the betrayal, or the fundraiser. It let me look at my scars not as trophies of what they'd done to me, but as proof of what I'd survived. The restitution payments began trickling in. They weren't huge sums. Claire's assets had been picked over by lawyers, court fees, and the freeze, but each deposit felt symbolic. It wasn't just money, it was a small piece of justice delivered in numbers on a bank statement. I decided early on that none of it would be wasted. The first thing I did was schedule the remaining skin graft surgeries I'd been putting off. The hospital was willing to work with me now as that they knew the funds were secure. Walking back into that place, I half expected the old memories to flood back the ICU smell, the beeping machines, the loneliness. But instead, I felt calm. I was there by choice now, not because someone had dragged me in from the edge of death. Jamie was still in my corner. She visited during the recovery days after surgery, sometimes bringing her own lunch, just so we could sit and talk like normal people, not nurse and patient. She had been there since the first crack in the facade, the one who dared to tell me the truth about the fundraiser. You know, she said one afternoon as we sat in my living room, you could just leave this city, start fresh somewhere else. I thought about it. The idea had a clean appeal. New streets, new faces, no whispers about the hero dad and the fundraiser fraud. But I shook my head. This is my home. They don't get to take that from me too. She smiled. Fair enough. Just promise me you won't let this be the only thing that defines you. I promised, and I meant it. In the months that followed, I started working part-time at a small auto repair shop owned by a friend of Aaron's. The smell of motor oil and the weight of tools in my hands felt like a return to something solid, something mine. My body was slower now, my strength still coming back, but I could work, I could contribute. One afternoon, as I was finishing up a brake job, the shop's front door opened and there stood Sam and Lily. They looked taller than I remembered, older in a way that made my chest ache. Behind them was my sister, who had arranged the visit without telling me. The kids were hesitant at first. I didn't push them. We sat in the office drinking sodas, talking about school and the weather and the stray cat that had decided to live in their yard. I didn't bring up their mother. I didn't need to. This was about them, not her. When they left, Sam hugged me quickly like he wasn't sure if it was okay, and Lily slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. Later, I opened it to find a drawing of a man with burn scars standing tall in front of a house with the words, "You're still my hero." It broke me in the best way. I knew then that I'd done the right thing, not just in fighting for the money, but in refusing to disappear. Claire could have the condo, the SUV, whatever scraps were left of her so-called fresh start. I had something she'd never get back, the truth on my side, my life rebuilt on my own terms, and the chance to be in my kids' lives without her shadow blocking the light. The fire had taken my home. The betrayal had taken my trust, but neither had taken me, and I wasn't about to let anyone think they could. The day I finally moved out of that cramped apartment, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner, like even the walls were relieved I was leaving. I'd found a modest 2-bedroom place on the edge of town, close enough to the shop for work, but far enough from the old neighborhood that I wouldn't accidentally run into Claire or Greg at the grocery store. When I carried the last box in, I stood in the middle of the empty living room and just breathed. No more peeling paint on the walls, no faint smell of old cigarettes in the curtains. This place wasn't just a home. It was a proof that I could build something again from the ground up. Jamie came by with a bottle of sparkling cider and takeout, insisting on a housewarming for the new chapter. We ate on the floor, surrounded by boxes, laughing at how little furniture I owned. "That's the good part," she said between bites. "Everything here will be chosen by you. No hand-me-downs, no compromises, just yours." She was right. The court process was officially over. Claire was serving her sentence, Greg had moved out of state after cutting his deal, and the restitution payments were scheduled for the next few years. But the real closure wasn't in the legal victories. It was in the way I felt when I looked in the mirror now. I used to see the burns first. Now I saw the man wearing them. A man who had walked into fire twice, once to save his family, once to save himself, and survived both times. A few weeks after I settled in, I got a letter in the mail. The handwriting was careful, deliberate Sam's. "Dad?" It read, "Mom says a lot of things, but I know you didn't do anything bad. I'm glad you're okay. I want to come over when I can. Lily does too. We still have your picture in our room." I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. It was the kind of message that could melt steel. I didn't need them to choose sides, I just needed them to know the truth. And now they did. The shop picked up business in the spring, and with the extra hours came more stability. I started putting away money for the kids, not as a legal requirement, but because I wanted to. Because after everything I still believed in giving, without expecting anything in return. One night, after a long day at work, I sat on my porch watching the sun set behind the trees. The sky was streaked with gold and deep purple, and for the first time in a long time I felt still, not waiting for the next blow, not bracing for another betrayal, just still. I thought about the fire, about the apartment, about the courthouse, the news cameras, the sentencing, and I thought about how close I'd come to letting all of that define me. But it didn't. Here's what I learned. Sometimes the people you'd risk your life for will measure your worth in dollars. Sometimes they'll decide you're too expensive to keep. But their math is wrong, because the value of a life isn't in what it costs to save it, it's in what that life does after the saving. I don't forgive Claire, I probably never will. But I don't need to carry her with me anymore either. She can live with her choices, I'll live with mine. And mine have brought me here to a quiet home, an honest job, and the knowledge that I can rebuild without anyone's permission. If you've ever been burned literally or otherwise, you know the truth. Scars don't mean you're broken, they mean you fought like hell to make it out. I did, and I'm still here. So if you're out there holding on to your own ashes, listen to me, you can start again. And when you do, you might just find that what you build from the ruins is stronger than anything you had before.